Hi, just a quick follow-up to my previous video, which I'll link in down below if you haven't seen it, where I basically took you as a walkthrough through the entire process of laying out this Nixie tube PCB that I've done here. And that was like an hour and 20 minutes worth. It seems very popular, but one of the common questions I got was a lot of people wanted to know what would the auto router produce? What this layout would look like if we actually let the Altium auto router run on this thing? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question, so I thought we'd take a look at it. So here is my manual layout, and it's fairly neat and tidy. It's not the most optimal thing in the world, but you know, look, it's got the high voltage bus along the top there for the 160 volts or whatever. It's got the ground plane in there. It's got the serial clock lines, you know, going right through like that instead of hickledy-pickledy all over the board. So, you know, there's a couple of, you know, nice manual routing touches in there. And as people will know, I'm not a big fan of auto routers. I don't suggest you use them. But there are times when selectively, actually, when I was a professional full-time PCB layout engineer, I would often selectively use the auto router. So I'd, you know, auto route certain parts of it. I'd never ever, professional PCB designer does not auto route an entire board, but they use it selectively. And sometimes you can spend hours or days setting up the auto router to do, you know, precisely what you wanted it to do. And it can actually help in those regards. But people wanted to know what would happen if I just let the auto router rip on this board. And I thought, well, you know, that's interesting. Haven't used the Altium auto router for years. This is the latest Altium Designer 17 that I've got installed here, the full package. This is not Altium Circuit Maker or Circuit Studio. It's a full professional Altium Designer. Now, Altium have never had the best auto router. The Situs Autorouter, I think they're still calling it. It's always been pretty meh, you know. It hasn't got a lot of fans, but I thought, hey, we'd give it a rip. So what I've done here is I've just made a duplicate of the board, so I haven't changed anything, but I've simply unrouted everything, and that's what you can go. You can just go unroute all nets, and it just gets rid of everything. And so that's what I've done. I've gotten rid of everything, so I'm actually going to let it do the whole kit and caboodle of the grounds, the power, everything. The grounds are going to be horrible. It's going to be ground traces everywhere. It's going to be a mess. But I thought we'd run it exactly the same circumstances and compare my manual route with the auto-routed version. So let's give it a go. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go into route up here, auto route. There we go. And we want to auto route all. Now, I would love to simply exclude the, you know, the ground net or something like that. We might be able to do that. I haven't set up any net classes or anything like that. But anyway, we'll go into auto route all here. Now, I've got my the rules I had before, 15 thou clearance and 10 thou track. I've got my VIA set up exactly like I had it when I was doing the manual routing. And you can go in here and you can edit all of the rules. You know, you can go in there, the routing via style and the clearance and all that sort of jazz. But I've got that all already set up as per my manual route, so it should be identical. And we've got several versions here, like several different pre-built-in algorithms. The default two-layer one, default two-layer with edge connectors, default multi-layer, general orthogonal. We'll just go with the default two-layer board because that's exactly what we've got here. But yeah, you can go in and you can edit all sorts of stuff. You can lock any pre-routes down here that you might have had, for example. So if you already have partially routed the board, you don't want it to rip up your stuff and things like that. But we're going to do the whole thing. So here we go. I am going to run this entire auto route. Can I actually clear all messages? There we go. So the messages up here should show up while it's auto routing. So let's just go ahead. We might be able to do some more optimized routes and stuff later, selective routing and things like that. But let's just go run it all and see what it gets. It might do a half reasonable job for a lot of stuff, but I expect the grounds to be awful, of course. And, you know, probably the traces running all over there. Maybe it won't even complete the route or whatever. But we'll give it a go, shall we? So here we go. Where are we? Default two-layer board, route all. Go. Go, Silver Sovereign, go. There we go. Routing 81 of 237 connections routed. It's already at 50%. Is it? Really? It doesn't look like it. But you can see, like, grounds around here. You can see, though, like, that's actually grounds. They're actually grounds. Look, it's doing a horrible job of this ground. Like, it's just, it's complete balls up, right? So you don't want it to route grounds. Typically, as you saw when I was doing my manual routing, you would only want it to, you leave the ground until last and then you flood fill that in later. You actually polygon that, fill that in. So it's not helping that we're actually routing the grounds here. This is why you just never go route all on your board, unless you absolutely have to have it done in 5 minutes and you just didn't give a rat's ass. Then that's the only time that you would route all. So you definitely wouldn't want to route your grounds. But power, of course, yeah, you'd want it to route your power. And but you can see that trace going, that red one going here. This is all just ground. I mean, it's just like it's cutting off pads and doing whatnot, and it's not going to be great. But here we go. It's already got some contention up here. You might see some traces like overlapping each other. It'll tidy all that stuff up when it's done. But yeah, so now it's, it started off all guns blazing, and now it's really trying to figure it out. And you can see the rat's nest changing there, but it's looking, like if you take away the ground issue, it's looking like okay, it's doing something. It's not going too horribly wrong at the moment, but it'll be interesting. Yeah, we definitely want to set up, you might want to set up net classes, only do selected nets and things like that. You can like route an individual component, for example, and stuff like that. So ideally, if I was setting up this and wanted it to do auto routing, I wouldn't include the ground, of course. I probably wouldn't include the power. I'd probably route the power myself. I'd actually pre-route the power, and then I would just leave everything else on its own. But yeah, we're getting there. 207 of 238 connections. Starting layer patterns. So this is the general 2-layer algorithm it's using, and you can set up, by the way, I forgot to show you, there was it's set up for automatic direction on both the positive top and bottom layer, but with an emphasis on the vertical direction for the top layer, which is the red one here. And you'll notice that it's doing mostly vertical stuff with the red there, in terms of like going to the Nixie tube and stuff like that, and it's kind of doing more a horizontal emphasis on the bottom layer, which is the blue layer there. So apart from that red ground one we saw there, it's generally following those rules. So it's doing it, in the same way I would have approached it manually, and I did approach it manually, routing this thing. The top layer I did most like vertical, and then the bottom layer I kept for more horizontal type stuff. So here we go. It's struggling. I'm screen capturing. I've got an i7 7660, 3.5 gig, decent computer here doing this thing. But auto routing takes time. But hey, if it works for you, it can actually save you some time. And as I said, selectively auto routing stuff has worked in my professional experience laying out stuff, but I never would let it do this amount of, a full board or anything like that. But hey, if you had to have this board out in 5 minutes, it'd work, right? It'd kind of, it's low frequency stuff. It'd be awful. You wouldn't take pride in it. But if you just had to get something lashed together for a one-off thing that you had to absolutely send away today, or in the next couple of hours, you might let it do this. And, well, you probably have no choice, right? Because to manually route this might take 2-3 hours or something like that. And if you had to send it away with an hour's notice, because then you'd miss the deadline on the PCB manufacturer and you wouldn't get it, blah, 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 then, sometimes you may not have a choice. Or if you simply don't care, trust me, learn to care. Take some pride in your layout. It's an artwork. We're almost there, 227 of 238. And I may as well waffle on for the rest of it, because we're we're getting there, and, well, it's not like, there's all garbage down in these dead spaces here. It's sort of, said, okay, well, I don't need to route ridiculous stuff all over here, and it's doing okay. Well, this right angle crap in here, it might do a cleanup pass at the end or something like that, but it's doing okay. The screen capture software is going to slow this down as well. Of course, it could easily double the time that it takes just because it's got to screen capture this whole thing in the background. But come on, you can do it. You can do it. Altium Situs Autorouter. It's kind of fascinating to watch it go, though. I do enjoy watching auto routers do their thing, but no, I'm always going to have an issue with it, regardless of what end result. There's always going to be something pretty horrid in there. But electrically, everything should be fine because it's going to meet the design rules, the clearance, the trace widths, everything else, and all the nets are going to be joined. Sometimes it just will back itself into a corner because it doesn't know what it's doing, and it's just given up ripping up traces and rerouting them, and there might be because this is a little bit tricky in terms of like cross tracing, traces going off that way and this way and crossing and stuff like that. So it might not be able to complete a couple, but here we go, 231 of 238. So it's really taken its time with these last ones because of all the congested space in there. It's just to solve one now takes time. 232, there we go. Actually, I'm going to stop now. I'll come back when it's done. We are done. And routing finished with 0 contentions, but it failed. There you go. It failed to complete 6 connections in 7 minutes and 41 seconds. And you can see the ones that it's actually failed to do. You can still see the white's rat's nest here. So look, I mean, like it didn't even try to get the. Come on, I can see easily. My human mind can see where that's easily going. These two ones, it could easily go up here like this. And then, look, they can even get, look, there's a direct path right up here, right around here. Just move that a bit, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Look at that. I mean, it's, that's too easy, right? And it said I couldn't complete that. And likewise, this one here. Look, it couldn't figure out how to get this trace up here, through here like this, because this one, you can't fit 2 between these pads just because of the clearance rules. Anyway, even if you didn't have to, this one could have moved as, my human mind says, okay, look, this one instantly can move out here like this, even if we had to go through here. But it couldn't figure out how to get through there, shove this over a little bit, and then go connect there, because it got caught on this via here, right? It just got completely caught and didn't want to, it determined that it had to move too much stuff and do too many things and make too many decisions to move that via up there, whereas I'd just tidy that up in a minute or two, right? Fixed as a human router. So and this one, maybe, this one, no, you drop a via down to the bottom. See, this one here, right? I haven't even looked at the rest of it. This one here, I would immediately, how I'd fix this, immediately drop it here on the top side, drop it down to the bottom side. You can see we can route this trace right up to here. Then I'd bring it to the top side again, keep running the trace up here. And where does it have to go to? It's got to go to that one up there. Okay, so I would have dropped it back down here because we're boxed in. Would have dropped it down here to the bottom layer, take it up here, and then take it to the top side again, and here, and we have to get it around to there, but even, you drop it down again, another layer, and take it across. I mean, I could fix that in 10 seconds, right? So, yeah, and look, it's left these horrible angles like this. I hate this. That's just an acid trap, as they call it in the business. When you put it into the acid etch bath, then the acid can bubble around in there and it can etch away excess stuff on there. A professional PCB designer would not have a back angle like that. I mean, 90-degree angles are generally frowned upon just because, right? Even though, this like acid traps generally aren't a big deal these days with modern etching techniques and stuff like that. They've done it down here as well. But, you know, it's just like if you did that, if you're a professional designer and you submitted for design review a board that looks like that, you know, you just get laughed at or get the sack or something. You know, no professional designer is going to have angles like that in their board just because. Yet this, like, it did it just fine. And where's the, oh no, look, see? Look at this. 2 traces shorted, overlapping each other. Oh, shouldn't that have shown up as a contention or whatever? That's ridiculous, right? It's completely screwed up there. So, like, down here as well. What the hell? Oh, sorry, that's VCC. That's the same net. Okay, but that's just, like, it's horrid, right? And why is it determined that it needs 2 traces in here for the ground? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And what's going on here with this angled trace like that? I mean, come on. It should have stuck. I'm pretty sure I've got, like, it's done, like, you know, the 45 degree angles and everything for most other stuff. Like, some of it's not bad. You know, like, you know, these down here and stuff like it's doing a reasonable job, but there's just a lot of messiness in there. Yeah. Anyway, in there's 6 routes it couldn't complete, even though it's trivial to see. Like this one here, give me a break. Like instantly, with like just a 1-second glance, I can see that you can bring this trace up here like this, bring it around outside here, up. Whoop, hang on. Sorry, yeah, up around here like this, and bingo. Oh, and back through here and to there. I mean, that was like a 1/2-second glance at that showed me where that route was obvious. You know, so bloody computers. I'm not worried about the singularity. And of course, the other auto routing thing you can do is to route individual nets like this one that didn't complete, for example. So you can just go auto route and then you can go individual net. So just one net at a time. You know, if there's one pain in the ass thing that you've got to get from one side of the board to the other, then often it can be handy if it's a non-critical trace just to let the auto router do that. So we can give that a burl to see if it can do that. Thank you very much. And yep, it did it, didn't it? There we go. It went down there with a horrible little right angle thing there and a little turd there and a, you know, but then it jumped over to here and then it jumped over to there and down to there. But see, it did that. Why it couldn't do that as part of the auto router, why it said this was the completed auto router board, why it said it couldn't complete that unroutable when it could easily just go ahead and do it as a single route. It's, you know, algorithm fail. And there's a whole bunch of other auto routing stuff you can do, you know, areas, rooms, the net classes as we've taken a look at, component classes and all sorts of stuff. You can set up individual rules for each one and it can get quite complex. As I said, a professional using a selective auto router on a really, you know, important complex board would, you know, spend many hours just, you know, setting up and make sure and they get the auto router tried. They might even give it a couple of goes and stuff like that to, you know, using different rules to, you know, see if they can get it to do it. But this is bloody mess. Don't like look at this. Look at this. Routed down to here. What the? Yeah, they're the same net. Okay, so they're allowed to be on top of each other. But oh, that's the clock line. Okay, so this is one of the clock lines. Look at this. So, you know, my nice one, for example, like you go over here, okay, select, well, hang on, boom, and then tab. There we go. Like my one, you know, you saw that me route that in the video, you know, those nice 2 traces that you might route these before you actually start your auto route, for example, letting your auto route rip, and look what it's done. I mean, it's, you know, of course you can force it to prioritize this and stuff like that. You can get real complex with your rules and stuff like that if you thought that trace was important, but look what it's done. It's gone up here, there's a route switch back like that. Gee, it's not a bloody railway layout. It's like, this looks like a classic rail layout, not a bloody PCB auto route. Anyway, blah. So what we'll do is we'll just unroute all and start again. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is do that exact one again, but not route the ground in here. Now, Altium should make this easier, and maybe they have. I haven't been using 17 for a while, so maybe there's a simpler way. But basically, we need to go into classes here, and we need to set up different net classes. So what I've done is I've got all, before, like all, by default, every net goes to all nets, and that's what we were routing before. But now I've set up all but ground. So I've put in every net in there except ground. So I've removed ground from there, and ground just sits in its own net. So now we can actually, instead of routing the entire board, we can route just that class. All right, so here we go. Auto route. And instead of all or an individual net, we'll route a net class. And we can select all but ground. There it is. So we'll select all but ground, and away she goes. And you notice, remember before it actually did the ground one first, it hasn't actually routed the ground. So now it's doing the power, because we want our 5-volt power, because we don't, this isn't a multi-layer board. We don't have our power planes and stuffs like that. So this, it might get to 100% completion now that we've actually, taken out the grounds from this, because we can fill in those later with polygon pour and, tidy it up. So let's see what it does with just the main nets here and the VCC, which I think is so this is quite a realistic scenario. If you asked me to auto route this board, I had to do it in the next hour, this would probably be how I'd do it. So I'll come back and we'll check out the end result. Now, I'm not sure why it keeps popping up with this. That's rather unusual. Does anyone know? Haven't encountered that before. But then again, I don't do much auto routing. And again, what's going on here? It's like, All right, this is getting ridiculous. This is getting unusable. It's almost as if it's popping up after each net is routed. It's just nuts. The hell? No, it's just not incrementing at all now. It's still stuck on a net 170 of 238. And it just keeps popping up. It's just like, what? I don't get it. Am I doing something stupid, or is this thing just not working? Nah, I have to give up on this. It is not progressing beyond 170 of 238 connections. It seems to just be spinning its wheels on the exact same problem there. So I'm going to have to call that. I'm going to have to call that quits. That's just nuts. Rounding finished with 11 contentions, failed to complete 68 connections. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Well, that didn't work at all. Yet, as far as I know, that is the way that you would do it. To do everything but ground. You just auto route the net class, and it should just do everything. I mean, God, I can't even route that. Give me a break. Like, it's crap. What? Anyway, there's probably some reasonable routes in there if you had a look of them. Half of them might be, like this one here is quite reasonable, what you do yourself kind of thing. But, no, that's a fail. Ridiculous. All right, let's just try another auto routing technique called selective auto routing, where let's just select two components like this, right? And this would be quite, common for a professional layout person to do this in a bit more detail setting with more strict rules and everything. But let's give it a go, okay? Now, what we got, we can have just auto route the connections on the selected components or the connections between the selected components. So let's just do some between the selected components first, once again using all the same rules that we've already been using. So let's give that a go. So it'll only auto route those. There you go. And of course, it didn't touch the, it did the grounds between the pads there. So once again, we probably have to set up, classes and all sorts of other things. It didn't let us exclude a class from just these two, which is kind of, annoying. So we wanted to do that. Ideally, we wanted to do that with a restriction on classes. But anyway, so we've individually routed that. So let's actually undo that. And it's done a, half reasonable job there, right? For those few connections. Unroute all. And let's try that again, actually. Let's select those. but let's auto route on selected components. So it should also do the connections between this other chip over here as well, and it'll do the clock lines between those two chips. Hopefully it should connect on selected components. So let's try that. There we go. It's started to do this U2 chip here. See, so we can just have it select those things. So there's no reason why you can't go in there first and do like all of your clock line, for example. Put your clock line in there, put your ground, like, stuff like power supply. You wouldn't auto route our power supply. You just, put those traces in yourself. Take at least a minimum of pride in your work there. And of course, you'd exclude grounds and then just, like auto route just the logic connections. This is a classic why it's important. Like if you've got a really dense, huge board with lots of digital logic, and it's not particularly high speed, there's not high speed design rules and differential pairs and all the fancy pantsy stuff, right? Then often you just let it rip. For example, just let the file rip on a particular board. If the signal integrity wasn't critical between two chips and things like that, yeah, just have at it. But the problem with doing selective routing like this, without having to have done, pre-routes first and things like that, is it's going to, lock you in. It's going to block you in much further down the track when you start doing more routes and things like that. So, that's why a good PCB layout person is worth their weight in gold, because they'll be able to think halfway across the board ahead, 1,000 routes ahead, and go, oh, I need to leave space for that. And, you don't have to dick around setting up rules. It's just all kept in your head and things like that, as you saw on my previous video. But of course, it does take more time to auto route, to manually route a board, of course, but you're going to often get a much better job. But, auto routers can be useful in selective scenarios and just getting something. As I said, if you needed to have something out the door, it's 3 o'clock and you need to send out that file by 4 o'clock, then you're not going to be manually routing the thing. You just want to get something sent out, then you can auto route it, and at least you'll have something to build up, mock up a prototype with, and hopefully get the thing working. But yeah, they're not terrific, but Altium is not the best auto router algorithm out there, not by far. In fact, some people consider it the worst or one of the worst auto routing engines out there. So yeah, all you auto routing fanboys, flame away that, oh, Eagle's better, or this is better, or that's better. And of course, you have to do exact side-by-side comparisons. I'd have to lay this out to do a real shootout between algorithms. It'd have to be laid out precisely on exactly the same grid, components, all exactly the same footprints, everything with the exact same nets and layout, the exact same rules, everything else. It's got to be 100% apples to apples, or it's just not worth comparing auto routers, really. So basically there you have it, side by side, an auto-routed board, fully auto-routed board on the top there, including all the grounds and the power, and my manually routed board down the bottom here. And well, it's not terrific, of course. There's lots of horrid things in there. There's lots of stuff you got to tidy up, and there's 6 missing nets which you couldn't do, which were absolutely trivial, which is should have been able to handle. But you tweak the algorithms. You maybe include some selective auto routing. You probably can eventually massage it into doing a reasonable job, like a half competent manual route down the bottom here. But if we take a look at the bottom side here, you can see how, manual routing, I did very few on the bottom. I really tried to optimize everything on the one layer, whereas the manual, the auto router just went, hey, I've been given 2 layers, let me at it. Even though it did try to prioritize the horizontal ones on the bottom layer and the vertical ones on the top, it didn't do nearly as thorough a job as I did manually here. So that's why you end up with all the crap on the bottom. And then if you tried to tidy this up with the ground plane, go in there and select your ground, for example, and then, get rid of all that. And, look, it hasn't even routed grounds on these other chips. So, that's just nuts. If you wanted to ground fill that, then there's no space left to do it. You have VIA jumpers everywhere on your ground. So it's not terrific. Auto routers aren't great. They are very, very powerful tools used in the right hands under the right setup conditions. But, the myth of just being able to route your entire board, unless it's ridiculously simple, it's just going to produce a horrible result. So there you go. I hope you liked that little quick look at Altium Autorouter technology, and on a fairly average double-sided board of sort of smallish complexity with a few little tricky cross-routing stuff it had to deal with, and yeah, it didn't do a great job at all. Anyway, if you liked the video, please give it a big thumbs up. Catch you next time. And go on, all you auto routing fanboys, have at it down below.